Subject is approaching and appears dejected, and possibly undergoing cranial remolding. Heather, girl, how soft do you think an adult skull is? But anyway, is the fastest way to get over someone really to get under someone else? Can a relationship ever be successful if one or both of the people in it feel like one of them is settling for the other? And when will bonker balls be added to the DSM? These are some of the questions my guests and I might try to answer as we break down the music and the mental health themes in Crazy Ex-Girlfriend Season 1, Episode 4, titled I'm Going on a Date with Josh's Best Friend. That's right, we're discussing pap smears with mom, sex with a stranger, ideal partner preferences, and fear of intimacy. I'm Aurora Brown, and this is We're All So Broken Inside on the Intersectional Psychology Podcast. Do you want to get weird? Aurora Brown and Intersectional Psychology acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of country throughout South Africa and their connections to land, water, and community. We pay our respects to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Indigenous people listening today. Okay, guests, listeners, you might want to cover your ears for this one. Settle for him. Why not just settle for him? He's a nice, smart guy, and he and I do get along. Well, sort of. As soon as I'm done peeing, it's time to start being a bit more realistic than I've been. Maybe it's time to grow up and just settle for him. Okay. Sex with a Stranger would have probably been funnier here, but I couldn't nail down the melody for that song. It's arguable whether I got this melody. But hopefully, as Connie rates Rebecca in Season 4, singing 0, commitment 1,000,000. Welcome back to Intersectional Psychology. Today, I am delighted to be joined by two very special guests. Nazneen Firfirey is a clinical psychologist and member of the South African Sexual Health Association. She provides both individual and couples therapy with specialties in attachment-based theory, sexual health, gender affirmation, depression, anxiety, trauma, and personality disorders. Welcome to the podcast, Nazneen.
Thank you.
And my second guest is Lyle Wilson, a biodiversity and conservation biologist focusing on genetics and DNA extraction and analysis in aquatic ecosystems, which is all true, but is also my way of skirting around the topic of frogs, which is his real passion. But he is also a musical theatre performer, a singer, dancer, and actor. Welcome to the podcast, Lyle.
Thank you so much. Super excited to be here.
There are no frogs in this episode of Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, which I feel like is a huge missed opportunity on their part.
Disappointing.
Let me start with, what is your relationship with Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, Nazneen?
So I've only actually started watching the show this week, so in preparation for today's show. And I tried to think back to 2015, what was happening for me then and why I missed the show initially. And then I realized I actually was not subscribed to Netflix at the time in 2015, so I would have missed it. And I actually thought it was so sad. It's such a relatable show, and I actually now feel like I want to get into it and see where this goes and see who she does end up with. So I'm quite keen to continue watching Crazy Ex-Girlfriend.
Oh, that makes me so happy. Lyle, what is your relationship with the show?
So I also missed the bandwagon for some odd reason. I remember seeing it around on some blogs. But then a few years later, snippets of that song came up, which I absolutely fell in love with. And if I'm not mistaken, the lyrics go, "You ruined everything, you stupid bitch." And I was like, okay, this is something I've got to get into. Um, and then I could never ever finish a season. But what I found is that every time I came back to watch it, there was just something else that I fell in love with or that I could relate to. So it was quite interesting. But yes, now I plan to actually finish it.
Now I'm going to recap the plot of Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, Season 1, Episode 4. Lyle, would you mind timing me? Just set a timer for like 1 minute.
Okay, I'll raise my hand when a minute has passed.
Episode 4 of Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, titled I'm Going on a Date with Josh's Friend, was written by Erin Ehrlich and directed by Stuart McDonald. Okay, thank you. Okay, and starting now. Okay, Rebecca and Paula continue stalking Josh by hanging out at the skate park he frequents. Rebecca is dismayed when she learns that he is in fact on a sexy weekend away with his girlfriend Valencia. To make Rebecca feel better, Heather helps her find a guy to hook up with on Tinder. Rebecca takes the guy home but kicks him out before they have sex. The next day, Greg asks Rebecca to settle for him, while Josh asks Rebecca for help with his application for a job at his favorite tech store. Rebecca asks Josh whether she should accept Greg's invitation to date, clearly hoping that Josh will declare his own interest in dating her, but instead, Josh encourages Rebecca to date Greg. Rebecca's essay for Josh's application ends up making him seem too uptight for the chill environment of the store, so Josh has to settle for a job at his dad's radiology lab. Greg and Rebecca go to the taco festival together to Paula's chagrin. The date goes well until Rebecca ditches Greg for the hipster vegan guacamole vendor she just met. Greg sees the hipster leaving Rebecca's apartment after they've had sex, so he confronts Rebecca and storms out. And my minute is up. Rebecca sees that Josh is working at the radiology lab, so she drags him to the tech store and convinces the manager there to hire Josh. Yeah, I mean, my mom was never very involved in my schooling or anything, but I think if I had a mom like Rebecca, I would have, I don't know, gotten ahead way sooner.
I loved the opening of that scene where her mother calls, because
Yes.
I assumed it was going to be the new girlfriend who she's becoming friends with, because that reaction was just so anti this phone call that it's definitely Josh's new girlfriend. And then it's the mother.
And this is the first time that we really get to see Rebecca's mother. And I don't know, like, Nazneen, would your mom phone you from her
Never.
the doctor's room where she's getting a pap smear?
And I think that goes to, and this is one of the stereotypes of the show, is that it portrays a Jewish mother in this intrusive, overly involved, over familiar way. And I think this opening shot with the mother about to have a pap smear with a gynecologist that has delivered Rebecca herself, I think shows that inappropriateness in their relationship and the fusion between the mother and the daughter. And I think in part how Rebecca is trying to be her own person, and there's this inner conflict with her about being her own person and then ascribing to what society deems acceptable. And so that's what it brought up for me, and just sort of um, I think, I don't know, it makes you cringe how inappropriate the mom is. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, it really made me realize, it's no wonder that Rebecca's other relationships, like with Paula, for example, are so disorganized or so boundaryless, considering this relationship that her mom has created with her. And then her mom, I mean, there's so much emotional abuse and like passive aggressive manipulation as well, where she's telling her about Audra Levine, saying, this rival of yours has the life you could have had, may almost had, but ruined with all your ridiculous choices.
I think it's very interesting because I'm not gonna lie. My mother does love me and does tend to involve herself, not to the extreme that this mother does. Um, but yes, I sort of related to that, where at the same time you almost just want to go, can I please just have a chance to sort my life out? I know what you're gonna say. You really don't actually need to say it. Please.
And I think we do have, I mean, we can have some empathy for the mother too. I mean, she also had that experience with her husband leaving her. And perhaps she projects that fear onto Rebecca and she's trying to save her from that eventuality. And it doesn't seem to be helping Rebecca in the way she hopes it would.
Is I do think that there is love there, but whether it comes across as love is questionable. So I'd love to see where this relationship goes.
I feel like from a very young age, Rebecca's mother has tried to motivate her through fear and through competition. So always putting her, she has to be the best at everything and better than everyone else because that's the only way that she's going to be safe and going to be secure. And maybe because, like you say, she doesn't want she doesn't want what happened to her to happen to her daughter. Um, we've gotten very serious. So, Lyle, let's talk a little bit about the about some of the musical references. What do you think "Sex with a Stranger" was kind of pulling on that song?
Sex with a Stranger was very interesting because when I watched it the first time, I was like, it feels very, very R&B, very pop queen. And then when I watched it again, I was like, I've seen this leotard somewhere before. And I couldn't work out where I'd seen this leotard, this runway, this black silhouette.
"Sex with a Stranger" was written by Rachel Bloom, Adam Schlesinger, Jack Dolgen, and Sono Patel, and performed by Rachel Bloom as Rebecca Bunch.
Have you been tested for STDs? Tell me please. STDs. Ran away to the 3-month window and got tested again. Just making sure. Most people don't know about the window. Hey, sexy stranger, let's go to my place. And please don't harvest my kidney. Don't give me that incredulous face. I saw a movie like that on Lifetime. On Lifetime. On Lifetime.
And then shout out to the director of this show because it's almost like a carbon copy of Ciara and Justin Timberlake. Love, Sex, Magic.
Yes.
And then that whole layer hit, and I went, "Oh my goodness, this is brilliant! A song that's whole intention is about this couple showing love, sex, and the power of magic, and making it work. Very sexual, very seductive, and then a carbon copy of it, just with so much more realistic lyrics. It was very interesting, and then it's layers upon layers upon layers with this show. I loved the use of that song, that imagery, an incredibly sexual, powerful song that just was used, but instead of being powerful and sexy, it just picked up of all of the insecurities of sex with a stranger, which was lovely.
Yeah.
But I also think if you don't watch the show at least twice, you don't pick up on it as well as you should.
It's so funny because I think you explained Love, Sex, Magic and the connections there so well. Rachel Bloom's delivery of some of those lines in the song, it was also reminding me a lot of Britney Spears's "I'm a Slave for You."
Yes. And that typical sort of like where you try to be sexy and then we're whispering in the song to give it a break. And now I'm breathing heavily, but I'm more worried that you're going to steal things on the way from the bathroom. I mean, it's just genius.
Brilliant. So this is, Heather trying to get Rebecca to, feel better. So she's like, well, just find someone to hook up with.
What do you make of her ambivalence to not sleep with him? What do you make of her? So she wants to sleep with him, but then she also doesn't, and she ends up not sleeping with him. What do you make of that?
So for me, it was like she was down with the idea of sleeping with someone, and he seemed like a nice guy, so she takes him home. But then once it starts getting real, it seemed to me like it was a fear of intimacy, because it was like the same thing with Greg. The date is going well, they're getting on, and then as soon as he mentions, oh, maybe we can go back to your place, there's like this look of terror that comes onto her face, and I don't know. So I think there's something about sex, or that kind of like real intimacy, that she struggles with. And I was actually going to ask you what you think that symbolizes for her, because she ended up having sex with this, with the hipster guy with the guacamoles. But it's like, because she doesn't know him, she doesn't have a connection with him. It doesn't mean anything, and I don't think she really likes him, because she feels she has like this deep sense of shame after they've had sex. She's like, why did I do this? And so I feel like she could have that sex because it was meaningless. But when it came to Greg, where the sex would be more intimate, and with Jason, where they were starting to kind of vibe, it would also have been more intimate than with this hipster guy, who was just the worst.
I found it very interesting, especially with sex with a stranger, because of how Rebecca initiated that. She was very take charge. I know your name. That's enough. We're going now. And then that sudden switch between please don't steal my kidney. And then it's almost like, it became just a little bit too real for her too quickly.
Yeah, I think that song is great because it also, it highlights just the risk of that we kind of take put our lives in a stranger's hands every time we hook up with someone from Tinder, and then there's the whole, do you go back to their place, or do you invite them to your place, where at least you have the terrain and you feel safer, but then also they know where you live, and it's so like we are trusting strangers with such our deepest personal like safety. Um, and yeah, that's just kind of the culture that we have now. Um, yeah, Nazneen, what did you make of that kind of switch?
I agree with you. I think it's anxiety that makes her go so forceful in the beginning with this guy, and that she outright kisses him. And then I thought it interesting that she asks, after she's kissed him, for consent. Does he consent to this activity? And then he gives his consent, and immediately they head on off back to her place. So it brought up issues for me, or themes about consent, and at which moment is it okay for you to stop your consent, or to withdraw the consent, and is that okay? And I thought the show did that nicely, that she does then decide to not have sex with him, and that's okay. And even though he makes it a little weird, he actually then stops. He doesn't, it doesn't become a weird, unsafe situation for her. But I think that anxiety comes up when it's something that she can do. She can put herself in a position to expose herself to kissing a guy, and they can feel fine if there's no emotional connection or attachment there. And as soon as there is some kind of um, emotional vulnerability, like with Greg, I think it becomes real for her, and she cannot put herself in that situation, because then it means she risks getting hurt. So then she sabotages herself. And I mean, this is quite a good example. And I've never seen this portrayed in this way before, that somebody actually is on a date with someone, and you end up living with someone else and having sex with that person just because the date was actually going well. The date wasn't a bad date. They were really connecting with each other. Um, and so I think it's a response to this vulnerability against intimacy, emotional intimacy. And I think for many people, it makes sense. It's easier for us to relate to somebody in a physical sense, and it doesn't make us as vulnerable as it is to just sit with someone and perhaps to just stare into their eyes for a prolonged period. That can make some people more anxious than actually having sex with someone.
Because the minute there are real feelings attached, you suddenly become so much more vulnerable. So it's just easier to not attach the feelings.
Exactly.
I think what I'm really enjoying about this show is that it feels very relatable. This is what I'm thinking, this is what I should be doing, but this is what the voice is saying in the back of my head. And so while she's going along with it, and I think even in that sex with the stranger scene, is it's portrayed in such a strong female empowerment R&B pop star moment. But then all of these insecurities just keep on chiming in and eroding and eroding and eroding. And I think that's literally then repeated again with the date with Greg. That concept of I'm trying to do something and I'm doing it, but at the same time, these voices are just going, you can't, you can't, you can't. And she eventually goes, I'm not this person, which is lovely, but at the same, it's almost a little bit too relatable while you're watching it, and you're just going, oh, yes.
Now, why do you say it too relatable?
Because it's so easy to pretend to be the big, strong, powerful person and not be the vulnerable one. But then to actually go and admit this isn't what I am, especially in that like early parts of any sort of relationship, can be quite daunting. And here it's told through song, which I appreciate.
Yeah, I mean, she is a lot more honest with Greg than she ever is with Josh.
And I think there is something about Greg and Rebecca being sort of equal minds, very like-minded in some sense. That's why they have so much points of connection between the two of them. And I think that moment where she says she can't adult, um, I think it's a moment of insight for her. I think she doesn't know what to do with the insight. I don't think she follows it through. I don't think she engages with it enough. But I do think there is a moment where she knows that she, for example, can do very well at work. but then she doesn't do as well in interpersonal relationships with colleagues and friends and partners. And I think because it demands so much of us when we have to make ourselves vulnerable and transparent. And on some level, I think with Greg, he calls her out, and he can call her out on something. And I wonder if it's because he can estimate that she can tolerate it, and that she can actually have that conversation. She's not as fragile, I think, in that moment when he does confront her. I do think he, like you say, he comes on harshly, but I think he can estimate that she can take it.
Yeah. I mean, he does trust her to kind of take it and to own up to her to the incongruence in her presentation. Um, and he does treat her like an adult, which is also maybe something that she's not used to in romantic or in, close, intimate relationships. Um, I mean, Paula kind of treats her like a daughter. Her mother treats her like helpless and, someone that needs to be controlled. Um, and Greg is treating her like an adult, and maybe that's the first time that she is, um, you know, being seen that way by someone or being felt that way by someone.
And I don't think he's trying to shame her for having had what he calls a nervous breakdown. I think he's saying it maybe not eloquently, but he's saying, I see you. I see you, and I see this is what you've been through. Um, and I think when somebody sees us and it makes us uncomfortable, it's not going to be said in a way that we can unpack for ourselves. But there's something quite real in that moment. I think that she does, I think, understand that she is being seen. And that's why there's this integration. And she can't use her defense mechanisms. Like, she goes a little bit helpless, I think, in that moment, and almost, I think, a little bit like damsel in distress, because she becomes like a little bit hysterical. But I think she's quite resilient as a character.
Mm. And then she steps up and she meets him and they do resolve that like adults. Um, but she finds that threatening. I think you said earlier, she doesn't know what to do with that now. Like, now she has to take on a new role almost. Um, she has to, yeah, like you say, this is just a lot more to take on. And I'm getting the sense that you like Greg. I'm also, I, I mean, I have a soft spot for Greg.
What's not to like? He's charming, he's honest. So, I mean, yeah.
He's funny
And he can sing.
and he can sing and dance. He can tap.
That was a
Um,
surprise.
I think he noticed her before she even noticed him, and that's what she's always wanted. She's always wanted someone to desire her in the way I think she desires um, Josh. So I think it's for her. This is, I think it's always someone, when someone falls for you or has a crush on you, you don't actually see it happening, and we get to see Greg falling for her, and yet he too doesn't understand, because he too has this. He likes her, but there's also parts of him, like he says, he wants to punch her at the same time. So he's also these. I think the complexity in each of them is highlighted by the other partner, and I think that's what would make. And my fantasy is that she ends up with Greg, because I think there's so much already there, that they can work on and they can build on. Yeah.
I think they are very well matched. Do you think that, also maybe part of the reason she kind of panics when they start connecting properly and start getting deeper is that it means she's going to have to let go of this fantasy of Josh, which is her whole reason for moving to West Covina in the first place.
Yeah, I think so. And I think also she's, in her own mind, conflated Josh abandoning her with her father abandoning her. And so if she can get Josh back, in some way she can get a hold back of her dad and have that relationship in a reciprocal way where her dad and either or Josh can give her those feelings and be there for her in the way that she wants them to be there for her. So I think, I don't know if she understands why she desires Josh as much as she does. And it's also, she is fixated on Josh as a very one-dimensional person. Whereas I think she doesn't engage with Greg in that same way. She can see him as a three-dimensional person. There's been, if we talk about a spectrum of emotions, there's been many different feelings that she's had towards Greg, whereas with Josh, she idolizes him. And at some point, everyone is going to fall from grace. And he already has, but the projection she has with him hasn't dropped.
Yes. She just makes excuses for all of his shortcomings. Then we have Settle For Me, which is like a complete change of pace. It's Greg's first like big number, and so he's singing, and it's shot in black and white, and it's very much like Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, kind of those old school 19
Old Hollywood glamour.
Yes. But then also such a juxtaposition between that kind of coy and glamorous visuals with a song about being second best, and if he's your broken condom, I'm plan B. Settle For Me was written by Rachel Bloom, Adam Schlesinger, and Jack Dolgen, and performed by Santino Fontana as Greg Serrano.
Settle for me. It's a practical proposal. Settle for me. It makes a certain sense. He's a fantasy, but hey, let's think this through. Yes, Josh is a dream, but I'm right here in flesh and blood and self-hate. Settle for me in a sad way, darling, it's fate.
The Settle For Me reprise was written by Rachel Bloom and Adam Schlesinger, and performed by Rachel Bloom as Rebecca Bunch.
It's not the most it's not the most self-affirming lyrics. You would expect such a romantic song to be all about how I am the one, these are my skills, choose me because I'm the better option, and he's just like, no, just because. Also, I did love the reference to Single Ladies by Beyonce in that as well.
Yes.
That was great. I did like that.
Too.
Things. I mean, thinking about settling down for someone it's not a sexy thought. I mean, it doesn't inspire, if you think about it, it doesn't inspire that you're going to have hot, passionate sex with someone if you're settling.
I also love how that scene started with him in a full tux and a cane, and she's just there in her jeans and a shirt. And then she was in her jeans and a shirt for a while before she almost, okay, cool, maybe this could work.
But she's also like, when she eventually is in the ball gown, she's more about like, oh wow, it's a gown, like so twirly. She doesn't care about him. She's just like, yeah, I'm living this fantasy, but you can keep singing whatever. And Nazneen, you quoted Greg earlier saying, how he also kind of wants to, like, he likes her, but he doesn't, and he kind of wants to punch her. And I don't know, that whole scene or that whole like speech that he gives her before he sings Settle for Me, when he's like asking her out. I was like, I don't like Greg is attracted to Rebecca. I don't know if he really likes her as a person. Because he says to her, like, yeah, so I still like you, and I know I shouldn't. I don't want to. You're not that nice to me, and you're weird. And I tell myself to stop thinking about you, but every time you show up, it's like, boom, feelings. So it's all physical. Um, but and then when they have that moment at the taco festival, and she's like, your whole settle for me vibe. Um, and he's like, that's not how I remember it. I don't want you to settle for me. But we get each other and we get along. It almost sounded like he was saying, I don't want you to settle for me. I want us to settle for each other.
I think it's one of those interesting things because your heart automatically melts when somebody is saying, "I know I'm not your priority, but please choose me." Um, and then juxtapose with that old school Hollywood glamour, big romantic dance sequence, all of the loves, all of the feelings, city lights in the background. And then you're just sort of going, oh, this is beautiful, but he's telling you to settle. And your heart sort of, my heart absolutely pumped for him that he's going, it's okay that you don't love me as much as I love you. I'll be fine with that. When clearly he's not. Yeah.
I think the way I understood that scene was that I think both of them are asking for the same thing, but in different languages, perhaps. So I think what he was asking for or of her was not just that she settle for him, but that she chooses him, that she doesn't settle for him because he's ultimately what the kind of guy she should be going for. And so I think there was a longing for him to say, well, choose me, don't just settle, choose me. Like I think he wanted her to um to deny what you were saying and to say, well, actually, I don't want to just settle for you. I would like to choose you. And I think it's what she yearns for most too. So I think on a very primitive level, I think both of what the internal desires are is actually that it speaks to each other. That's how I understood it. But I might also be biased because I like Greg so much. So that's
Yeah.
perhaps what I want to hear from both of them. Yeah,
Yeah, what you're saying makes sense.
I mean, it brings up for me that there's something about Rebecca's arrested development at the age when she was 12 and she had the birthday party and her dad then leaves. And that whole scene, it doesn't make sense because the way it portrays it is that the dad is so upset with the mom for having only invited three friends to the birthday party, but that doesn't make somebody leave a marriage. So obviously, we're not privy to what happens before that scene, and and I also it would be interesting to unpack what Rebecca really feels about what happened there. Um, and what caused the marriage to dissolve. But I think Greg too has arrested development if he needed to stop his own life so that he could look after his dad. And then there's all this unfulfilled potential. Um, and I think hers is emotional, so she's got emotional arrested development, and perhaps for him too. And now his life he's basically stuck psychologically at home base, also perhaps needing a reason to kind of move his life forward. And so maybe that too can explain why there's this projection onto Rebecca about her packing up her whole life and moving to a town where she's going to go nowhere. And he's one of the residents of this town going nowhere also. So what does that say for him? I think it brings up some questions that he too, it must be quite difficult to face.
Yeah, I mean, Greg, he every chance he gets, he says like, there's no reason to be here. You know, the taco festival is the second best thing to do in the town besides leave.
It just seems it reminds me a lot of what is that? Mr. Cellophane from Chicago. It's just it's things seem lovely, but when you just look under the surface just a little bit, it's actually not. And I quite like what you said, Nazneen. There is probably also a need from him in the small town that he keeps on deriding as a sort of a tongue-in-cheek throwaway comment, that chances are he himself is also just looking for some validation, somebody to go, hi, I like you, please go out with me, or you made the right choice in actually staying here, which clearly he's not getting.
I mean, I agree with you. I think she'll continue to relive the same relationship with her dad in every other relationship. Even not just in romantic relationships, there's always going to be the same dynamic that's going to reoccur until she can work her way through what the dynamic is.
So Rebecca interprets this whole song as like settle for me, but it's interesting. I wonder what you think about like the gendered dynamics of that, because I feel like settle for me is a very gendered kind of phrase. I feel like women are told to settle a lot more than men. Like if women hold out for their ideals, or for the true love or whatever, then they're seen as picky or like too hard to please. Whereas men, I've never heard a straight man being told to settle. But in a way, if Greg is, willing to date someone for whom he is second best, like isn't that settling in some way? He's also not settling for someone who is all in on him. And like Nazneen said, he wants her to choose him, but that's not going to happen. So he'll take being second best. What do you think about the gender dynamics of that?
I think you're quite right. I don't think men really settle. I think men are the one in society that chooses, and often, like I've had many friends and patients tell me, so during the time I was dating him, he wasn't ready to go to have a serious relationship. He didn't want to get married. And then after he breaks up with me and moves on, the very next person he chooses, he gets married to. So there is men in society are the ones that choose. They decide, straight men, when they're ready for commitment, they choose the commitment, and women are always looking for that, but then don't get to seem to have that power to decide. So no matter how much a woman would have affection or love for a man, it is he's the beholder, and he then decides whether or not he's gonna commit to her, and if not, that feelings just don't go away. And so I think when you're ready as a female, sometimes the male might not be equally ready. So I do think it is that women then have to decide whether or not they settle for someone else that is not maybe the ultimate goal, they keep holding out. And I think there's a lot of pressure, even more so now with social media, to find a partner and to be able to post your partner on your Instagram or on your TikTok. I think there's a lot of unspoken pressure on women to be able to do that. So I do think it's quite a gendered dynamic. But I think what you said about this is her interpretation of how she views her own world. And I think what Lal is saying also is about things appearing beautiful and things appearing maybe much better than what they actually are. That's why I think the show is also a musical, because we can say really serious things, and then we can say it with music, and it does it kind of it kind of tells us, gives us a perception that it's not actually as serious as what these issues are, but they are quite serious issues coming up, and something that needs to be delved into. And I think there's also euphemisms being used. So in one of the episodes, she speaks about feeling blue instead of feeling depressed. And so they use euphemisms to describe quite serious things without really needing to delve into it. And so I think it was quite brilliant that this juxtaposition of having a musical and having these songs interspersed throughout the episodes. Yeah.
What do we think about Greg's self-esteem and his, perception of self, that he is positioning, well, okay, like we say, this is her interpretation of what he says, but yeah. What do we think about how Greg sees himself?
I don't think he does. He has any. His self esteem is any better than Rebecca's. I think he, on the surface, looks like he's more confident than her, but I think he also struggles quite a bit. And even in scenes where they show him with Josh and Josh's friends, he doesn't really seem to be a part of that. Even though he's with them, he always seems on the outskirts of the friendship. So I think he struggles too, and I think that's why he can relate so well with her too, because he sees her insecurities and maybe it brings up his own. Yeah.
I found it very interesting that he seemed to have a closer connection with the kid in the coffee shop,
Mm.
and also taking advice and seeming to engage with this child on a much better level compared to everybody else in his life. And I just thought, interesting.
I think that child's parents are like falling over drunk at the bar, and this child is just kind of left there for hours, and so
Thank heavens that he's there then.
yes. Yeah, it could be much worse for that child. But that child seems to be one of the most mature people in the show. Um, hey, have we met Rebecca's Tinder hookup Jason before? I have theories. If you want more of my conversation with Nazneen and Lyle, check out the extended version of this episode on patreon.com/intersectional psychology. On the extended episode, we talk about how parents motivate and encourage their children in the context of Rebecca's mother, Naomi. We also delve deeper into Rebecca and Greg's date at the taco festival, as well as discussing those super dark butter commercials, more reasons why Greg may have an affinity for Rebecca, and Rebecca's burgeoning friendship with her super cool neighbor, Heather. Oh, and do you want to know why Lyle loves frogs so much? That's also in this week's extended episode at patreon.com/intersectional psychology. Thanks to everyone who subscribes. You really help us to keep doing this work. What do you think the outcome for, if Greg and Rebecca were to continue dating, what do you think would be an outcome for them, where they have this dynamic right from the beginning, where he is kind of seen as second best by both of them?
Personally, I think they'd just be really great friends. Because I see that there seems to be very little passion or drive from her side in the relationship in terms of that aspect, and I wonder if that wouldn't almost turn into resentment further down the line. It's because now I'm stuck with you, and sure, you're meeting all of these other needs, but are you actually loving? Like, I'm just not loving you, and I don't think it would be great for them.
I think eventually
about you, Nazneen. We're breaking your hearts.
I think you are. But I think Greg becomes the town. He becomes the town to her where she then gets stuck. And she can't outgrow that and she can't develop further. So I think he will stunt her development at some stage if she settles for him. And it's not because there's this instinctive true drive towards partnering him because she wants to. So I also think that I think there will be, yeah, I don't think they will make it.
I think I want to say that these two people would be great at a different time, but where they are both right now in their lives, I think they both need to do a lot more work, or they have a lot more growth to do before they can work together.
I remember being so hopeful at the beginning of the taco festival because they seemed that one they have a great rapport with one another. And then even with the conflict of the I think it was the guacamole, it seemed to be dealt with appropriately with respect for both partners involved. And then it's only after the porta potty that you realize, oh, it's all a cover on her side, which was a little bit sad.
Nazneen, so Rebecca does receive a diagnosis of a mental health condition in season 3.
Okay.
And I'm not going to spoil it or anything because also for the listeners who haven't watched all of the, like all 4 seasons, we're taking it episode by episode. But all of the, the psychology guests that I've had on the podcast have kind of offered up their thoughts unprompted by me. And so I was wondering, what your thoughts if Rebecca walked into your practice, what would you think?
I think definitely easy diagnoses would be a generalized anxiety disorder, a depressive episode, but I probably suspect there's a personality disorder. Um, I mean, I would assume by season 3 she will change and there will be many other layers added that we can see. But yeah, my best guess would be that there might be a personality disorder. Um, yeah, I don't know. Do you want to give a clue as to what it may be?
Um, um, no, like it's. I'm just loving that you are so professional and kind of because we don't
Mhm.
like jump to diagnose people, and you don't try to make you try not to make snap judgments about people, and that's how it should be when we're working with someone. We consider all of the options before settling on a diagnosis, um, and so I think everything you said makes sense. um,
I think what makes it difficult for me to diagnose her is that she's so relatable to me and she's such a lovable character. And I would think if she were in my office, that's also what makes it difficult with patients is that you start feeling there's transference and counter transference and patients make you feel a certain way. And sometimes labeling them is the thing that we least want to do. I think we want to understand our patients and formulate them with all the things we know about them and the ways in which they would like us to see them. And so I think you sometimes torn and just because we need to diagnose someone doesn't mean that it will always help us to treat them. Sometimes not having a diagnosis can help us as much. So I think I do feel it's quite difficult, and especially with terms like bonkers. She definitely didn't come across to me as somebody that is psychotic or hallucinating, which at this stage she doesn't seem to be. Yeah, she seems very neurotic. I think that was the first thing that occurred to me. And lots of overthinking, overanalyzing. Yeah, like maybe there's some compulsions or OCD traits. Um, but I think she's quite all over the place at the moment.
Yeah. What you said about, the longer we spend with clients and the more time we spend with people, the more difficult it sometimes gets.
Mhm.
And I think that's kind of what we're seeing now, or what I'm seeing with my guests now as well. Like, it's easy for the people who've watched maybe one episode, especially the first three episodes,
Mm.
where maybe her behavior was a lot less relatable or a lot more extreme. And so it was easy for them to jump at something. But here, there was such a raw, like emotional vulnerability in her
Mhm.
in this episode that your heart just kind of opens for her, and you, after watching almost 4 hours of her up to this point, like you do start feeling like this is someone that you want to that you like, someone that you like. And we see that with Heather's character as well. She decides to write a paper on Rebecca for her abnormal psych class. Um, and by the end of it, she says, like, screw this class. I don't want to label Rebecca. I want to be her friend. You can see how awkward that makes everyone in her class, because this is like the taboo. You don't
Everyone
befriend.
had such a visceral reaction to her saying, "I want to be a friend," and I went, "Oh, okay, that's interesting."
But it's like a taboo, and it's right. We shouldn't cross those boundaries with our clients. But at the same time, it's natural to have like transference and counter transference, and to develop some attachment to our clients after time, because if you're not having a real relationship with them, even though it's a therapeutic relationship, like, how can you effect any change in that relationship and in that person?
And also, the therapeutic relationship can also reenact the relationship where there has been abandonment wounds, and so you reenact that same kind of wounds, the formative from your formative years with your therapist. And so you do need it to be a realistic relationship where you can say something to someone. And I mean, we won't go around saying we want to be friends with our patients, but we can express the desire that you feel close to a patient. And I thought it was interesting what she did there, in that there is something quite seductive about Rebecca. And I think in that she seduces Heather to become her friend, and Heather, who makes a complete like 180-degree turn from studying her, then pulls her right close into wanting to be a friend. Um, and so there's also the seduction with her and Josh. So even though Josh is with his partner, he would then still asks her out for dinner. And I think there is something that can be further explored about how Rebecca can be seductive, and are those also, is she unaware of how seductive she can be, or does she know?
Interesting.
But that reversal, so Nazneen, you were saying how Heather makes a complete like 180 once she starts seeing Rebecca as a real person. And I think that whole reversal, it seemed to parallel for me something that happened between Rebecca and Valencia in episode 2. So Heather, you can see when Heather comes to Rebecca towards the end of the episode, she knocks on her garden wall and she comes in and um, Rebecca's like, "Oh, um, have you run out of content for your paper?" And I think Heather has in that moment a kind of a realization like, oh, this is a real person. She's not just a subject or like an interesting um, figure that I can write a paper about. It's a real person, and this person is struggling right now. She's in a bad place. And having what she's doing, writing a paper about a real person, having that kind of reflected at her so frankly helps her to realize, oh, this is a real person. And I feel bad now because I feel like I've been exploiting this person. Um, that kind of mirrored to me in episode 2, where Rebecca and Valencia are together on Rebecca's couch. After Rebecca has helped Valencia get her yoga studio, and they're having fun, they're drinking together, and Valencia says to Rebecca, um, "Oh, we're friends, right? I've never had close female friends before." And Rebecca has this realization, like, "Oh, this is a real person who I am using now." And she laughs it off and she kind of says like, yeah, I mean, what other agenda could I possibly have? um, but the difference between Rebecca and Heather is that Heather changes her approach and her um, position on what she's doing. Like, she stops writing the paper on Rebecca, she stops trying to label Rebecca. Whereas Rebecca doesn't stop using Valencia, she continues exploiting Valencia to get closer to Josh. And it ends up, blowing up in Rebecca's face. Um, but that is maybe also a function of, Rebecca being someone who does have a lot more challenges and a lot more issues than than Heather, who seems to be a healthier kind of person. I don't know. Was I reading too much into that, Nazneen? Because you've seen all of these episodes fairly recently.
It just actually made me think as you were speaking that I think even myself, um, you get drawn into the show and don't see that there is actual pathology with Rebecca, that she can mask very well, and she can speak as if things are trivial when actually there's a lot more serious things happening. um, and so it does make me think that you're quite right. I think there is this insight and realization and true insight with Heather, and she can change her behavior. And even though it made me think of, so even though she has this relationship with Josh's partner, she actually, for somebody that knows the rules, knows the law, she doesn't always follow the rules. So she knows that Josh has a girlfriend, and yet she's still trying very hard to break them up, even though it's not, she's not as strategic, maybe overtly strategic, but she is just hanging there. She's hanging around until they do break up or something happens that he finally realizes his love for her. So I do think that because she is such a competent, high functioning lawyer, I think a lot of things people would people would relate to her high functioning and competent self, instead of that. Actually, like you're right, she is struggling, she's really struggling. And I don't know if everybody can see how much she's struggling. I think Greg is one of the people, and Heather is one of the people that can see this real struggle and strife that she goes through. um
And maybe the reason that Paula isn't able to see that is because Paula is also trying to escape her home life and what is going on there. And she's using Rebecca's whole obsession with Josh as entertainment, or as, vicariously trying to live out her fantasies through this love story. I want to, before we move on to the Fanon test, I wondered if we could just quickly talk about Rebecca helping Josh to get this job at Aloha Tech. So, Nazneen, Lyle, can you talk to me a bit about, Josh asking Rebecca for help in the first place, and then how that whole story unfolds?
I have thoughts. For me, it automatically was just like it waved a little flag for me, because I love helping people, but if you're going to need my help, you're going to need to be involved in the process somewhere. Whether you are just sitting with me, giving ideas. I do it with my nephews a lot. If we're working on a school project or something, right? You're going to sit next to me. We're going to cut things. I'm going to tell you where to glue. But for me, helping somebody, they've got to be involved in the process so that, one, they can learn and that we can then do it. And the way she was just, give it to me, I'll do it. And then that was it. And then we didn't see it again until we had the post interview. And I just thought, this is problematic. That you're not even asking him to, because to me, in my scheming brain, I would have gone, this is the perfect opportunity to spend time with him, to go, let's do this together. Let the two of us organize a coffee time alone, separately, so we can work on this. And she just doesn't. She takes it and she does it all herself, beautifully, but all herself. And I just thought, this is interesting. And I don't know quite what that speaks to with her character, because it's almost it's a very controlling situation. Is, I am going to tell you the narrative and this is it, which was a lot of a red flag for me.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. Like, oh, why didn't she milk it to spend more time with him? But then also the fact that he didn't even read it before handing it in. I mean, this is supposedly an application to the place you most want to work. You're not even going to read the essay before you give it in.
And I think Josh takes it for granted that she would have his best interests at heart, and so would fill in that application form to his advantage. And actually, what she does is she fills out that essay for herself. She gives an answer that she would give if she were applying for that job. And so it does also speak to her ability to have empathy for someone else, and with someone else, to relate to somebody else's experience instead of just, and the whole show, she's the main character, the whole show is positioned to that everybody is interaction with her, so she and that she doesn't break that. So I think sometimes the relationships, even with Paula, for example, feels a little bit fickle, and it doesn't feel as deep as it could be. Here's this woman that has a family and a full-time job that takes out time in her day to spend with Rebecca and to cheer Rebecca on, but Rebecca doesn't actually sacrifice in any way any of her own comforts to put back into this friendship. And the friendship is not equal. And then also that Josh is that naive that he just trusts her. And there's, I think, many other examples of Josh just being naive and not also. I find him to be quite a character that hasn't been fleshed out enough in the first 4 episodes, because you don't get a true sense. You get this almost like cardboard cutout version of him, and he's like the ultimate pin-up boyfriend for that time, but you don't really get to see where he's at. And so I think that is quite naive of him, and how she manipulates him to then give her love advice.
Mm.
But I think also the fact that he hasn't been fleshed out so much is maybe because we're kind of seeing this whole town through her eyes at the moment. Um, and she just has this fantasy of him. So he's just perfect. He doesn't need to be anything more complicated than perfect. Um, and so we're able to see all of the other characters in a bit more dimension because they don't really matter to her. Like their their good or bad qualities are irrelevant as far as she's concerned. Um, they only serve to get her closer to Josh. Um, but yeah, I think he is used to. I think he's someone who's used to um, being the hot guy in town who everybody wants to be with or be friends with. And so he's used to people doing things for him. But I think he's also, we get to meet his family a little bit later on, and he's a bit of a mama's boy. Like, he doesn't take responsibility for his own life, he doesn't exercise a lot of agency. Even, and we've already seen it in these first 4 episodes, his relationship with Valencia. Like, okay, let's move on to the Fanon test. We can chat more a bit later if we have some time. So in the past, on these episodes, I've kind of gone through, my guests and I have gone through each scale one by one. But it does tend to get a bit repetitive, especially with a series like this that is the story's unfolding across multiple episodes. And so trying to assess in such granular detail for each episode is maybe not fair to the plot. And also it gets a little bit repetitive on the podcast. So what I've told Lyle and Nazneen is that we are I'll give a little bit of background on the test and what the 5 scales are, and then we're just going to talk about our general kind of impressions. So the Fanon test is a test for mental health representation in media. It consists of 5 scales, each with 1 question contributing 1 point, leading to a total score out of 5. So the 5 scales are the Cooper scale. Are mental health phenomena depicted and named with clarity? The Hill-Collins scale, are characters shown as whole people without stereotypes or pathologization? The Crenshaw scale, does the story acknowledge and challenge intersecting systems of power and oppression shaping mental health? The Childs scale, if it depicts mental health professionals or therapeutic processes, including Indigenous or informal ones, are these represented accurately, responsibly, and thoughtfully? And then the Martin Barros scale, does the story invite meaningful engagement with ethical issues without reinforcing stigma? So, would you two like me to go first?
Yes, please.
Yes.
So, my total score was 2.9, and that could be out of 5 because the whole test is out of 5, or I actually am inclined to say 2.9 out of 4 and not count the 1.4 mental health professionals or therapeutic processes, because this episode, like many of the episodes, don't depict that at all. And so it feels unfair to deduct a point for that. So I said 2.9 out of 4. And this test or this episode actually scored a bit higher than some of the other ones that we've covered so far. For me, it scored well on the Hill Collins scale. So are characters shown as whole people without stereotypes or pathologization? Because there were some stereotypes when we've spoken about Rebecca's mother. But then there's also, we see Rebecca and Greg go through some very difficult situations, very difficult moments, and have some moments of insight and some moments of confrontation and real insight into their mental health or their characters, but they're given some complexity and they're not just mythologized. Also said it scores quite well on the Martin Barreau scale because I think like this is one of my favorite episodes of season one. There's a lot of we get to see Rebecca in an emotionally vulnerable place and being honest with herself in a way that we haven't seen so far in the series. And it has given us a lot to discuss here tonight. Some of the on the Crenshaw scale, I gave it a 0.5. I'm trying to remember. So it shows some of the it shows how emotionally abusive and manipulative her mother is, and that is a system of oppression that has deeply shaped Rebecca's life and her character. But there weren't many other systems that were kind of depicted or challenged, I didn't feel, in this episode. And then I gave it a 0.4 on the Cooper scale because we saw some mental health phenomena and processes, like with Rebecca and Greg's confrontation at the house after he's seen the hipster leave. But what's going on there for Rebecca isn't named with clarity. It isn't explained at this point in time. It's going to be explained a bit later on, hopefully. So yeah, that was kind of my reasoning with the scoring. Nazneen, how did you rate this episode?
So I rated it a 3 out of 5. So I thought this episode so far has been the episode that has shown mental health close to what could be described as clearly in that the previous episodes don't at all name it, and so there's a little bit of naming it but not enough. So I thought it was still limited in its depth, but I think this is the episode that then opens up, and I think also foreshadowed by the previous episode with the song, the boy band song. I think that prefaced that this episode could actually then openly speak about mental health. So on the Cooper scale, I thought there was some hinting at mental health themes and issues, but it didn't name it clearly. So I thought it lost a point for that. With the Hills Collins scale, I think this is probably the most dynamic we've seen Rebecca up until this point in the series. And she isn't at this stage reduced to a diagnosis, although there are some stereotypes about crazy ex-girlfriends that is still lingering. And in the short stint of what we've seen with the previous time in the first episode where they were in a relationship together, we don't get given enough information to see what made her the ex-girlfriend, the crazy ex-girlfriend. And I think that's unfolding as time goes on. But to be honest, in my line of work, I see so many people on such a wide spectrum of behavioral experiences that it's quite hard to justify that this in itself makes her crazy. So I'm thinking that there might be a lot more mental health themes that do emerge as the series goes on. With the Crenshaw scale, I thought that, like we spoke about, there is gender dynamics that is spoken about, but it's not fully integrated, and it doesn't show enough of intersecting systems of oppression. I think there can be scope for that in later episodes. With the child scale, like you said, there is no formal therapy, there's no formal therapist. But I do think she has these friends that kind of offer almost therapeutic insights. And I think that's quite interesting that that's building as the series goes on. And also because I'm not quite sure at this stage, she might be quite suggestible. But then at other stages, that delusion of this fantasy life that she can have with Josh is so fixated that you can't break that delusion. And so no matter what the friends give her as advice, she doesn't always take it. And then the Martin Bedo scale, um, I thought that the episodes would invite some kind of ethical reflection on stigma in relationships, especially stigma around sleeping with strangers, and often then comments about stigma in a humorous way. And I think its downfall sometimes could be that it's trivializing important or serious issues. But then I also thought about it holistically. This episode gives us a way to speak about mental health that we might not have easily have access to in 2015 and even now. So it starts a conversation that I think is quite important. Um, and for that, there's quite great appreciation for the series and the writing and the acting itself.
Absolutely. And I think both of you have mentioned, it this episode in itself has it showed us um, outcomes to the scenes that we haven't seen elsewhere. Leaving a date with someone else, um, things like that, depicted that aren't depicted in any other show. Lyle, how did you score this episode?
So, Aurora, similarly to you, I got a 2.8. But for me, the high scores were the Hill Collins. I've never seen such an honest depiction of characters before, with no sort of with no fanfare. I think the only one who was really sort of painted with the stereotypical brushes that is the mother. But even then, she's not a stereotype. She is a whole person with stereotypical things that we've seen represented before. And then the Martin Barreau scale. And what I really like about the show is it forces you to engage in a way that you don't realize you're engaging with it. It comes across very fun, very enjoyable. You're just little. It almost feels like a sitcom, but then it really is not a sitcom. So those were 2.8. That's where it landed for me.
I love that. Was there anything else that you guys wanted to mention before we end off the episode? Anything else that stood out to you?
I think it's an interesting point that Niall raised at how deceptive the show is, that it speaks about quite serious things but in a very light-hearted manner. And there's something about what you're saying, Aurora, about kind of like with this show, almost sticking it to the man, like disrupting status quo by then speaking about things that wouldn't be necessarily be allowed on daytime TV, and speaking about it in ways that wouldn't have been approved of, but then doing it anyway and finding a platform to do that. So I'm glad that she's found the platform to put that song out there in its entirety. And I wonder what the show overall is saying about the cultural time in which it was aired. I mean, this is about 11 years ago that the show was aired for the first time, and how it would have been perceived versus now, and how we would perceive the show now. So now we've had series like Euphoria, and that really puts sex quite out there. And so this only seems to be like a nod and a nudge towards these concepts, and I think it shows us where TV has gone, and where social media has also been able to take concepts such as sex more into mainstream media than it was maybe just 11 years ago.
Absolutely. And I mean, you mentioned Euphoria. Like Euphoria did kind of push the I don't know, the limits of what they show on TV, but it also, I feel like it didn't unpack those topics with as much nuance and as much complexity as this show is doing. Um, but yeah, 2015 was a very different time. I mean, Hillary Clinton was running for president. People thought she was going to win. Um, and we got Trump instead. And I think it was also just before Me Too, or like around the whole Me Too vibe. So yeah, a lot of gendered things happening in politics and in society that I think have changed the landscape definitely for what we see in media. Lyle, any last thoughts from you?
Um, it's like a slow written musical, which I absolutely love, because if we think of our conventional stage musical, is all of our songs are that sort of internal monologue, that moment of realization. And what they've done so beautifully is they've married that internal monologue with pop culture references, which are then easier to digest. So it's almost like it's the perfect song. And by doing that, they're then able to slip in actual deeper meaning, and at the same time make it more realistic. I mean, we've all seen that typical romantic love song where they're actually just saying absolutely nothing but how pretty it looks when the flowers blow past their face and the leaves blow in the breeze. That's great. Beautiful imagery. Here we're actually painting a real story, and in doing so makes it so much more relatable, um, which I love. I can guarantee you I'm watching the next episode tonight.
That is such a beautiful note to end off on. So, Nazneen, where can listeners go to find out more about you and your work?
So they can email me. Can I give my email address? It's
Sure.
nazfirefly, one word. So that's nazfirefly@gmail.com. They're welcome to email me. Yeah.
Cool. I'll put that in the show notes if you are comfortable with that. Cool. And Lyle, if people want to find out more about you or want to learn more about you or see what you're doing,
I'm on all the
are you?
socials. I'm in a show at the moment.
Wow.
Oh yes. What are you doing?
So if you want to come see me on stage, Pirates of Penzance, we open the 4th of July and we run until the 12th. It's going to be a madcap, but so much fun.
Amazing. And that's on at the Artscape.
Yes.
Well, thank you both so much for being here. I've had such a great time on this episode. I'm probably going to invite you both back at some point. So if you're up for that, yeah, just let me know. Cool.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Listeners, thank you for being here. Look after each other. But for now, Nazneen, Lyle, let's go get the lives and the butter we deserve. We love you. Thank you for listening to Intersectional Psychology. Intersectional Psychology, We're All So Broken Inside, is not endorsed by Warner Bros. Television, CBS Television Studios, Lean Machine, Webterfuge, Black Lamb, Rachel Does Stuff, or any of their subsidiaries. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. Crazy Ex-Girlfriend and all names, pictures, audio and video clips are registered trademarks and or copyright of their respective trademark and or copyright holders. Please follow or subscribe to the podcast to get every episode. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review Intersectional Psychology in your preferred app. It really helps other people find the podcast. This episode of Intersectional Psychology was researched, written, recorded, and edited by me, Aurora Brown. For a transcript of this episode, please see the link in the show notes on your podcast app or go to intersectionalpsychology.com. A video of this episode is available on YouTube with closed captions. To support this podcast and get access to bonus content, including additional episodes and interviews, as well as more guided mindfulness sessions, please go to patreon.com/intersectional psychology. You can also chat with me on Blue Sky at intersectpsych.bsky.social and Instagram, Facebook, or TikTok at Intersectional Psychology. But mostly Blue Sky. Aurora Brown and Intersectional Psychology are committed to the site Black Women Praxis. All episodes of Intersectional Psychology are for educational purposes only and are not intended to be a substitute for professional mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. I, Aurora Brown, am not able to answer specific health questions about individual situations. Always seek the advice of your health provider with any questions you may have regarding a mental health condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard or seen on this podcast. If you think you need immediate assistance, please call your local emergency number or any mental health crisis hotline. Everyone deserves good mental health.